So also with your pen test too, you're going to want to maintain persistence or have some kind of backdoor to get in if you get caught. And this is more like in a adversary simulation type scenario. But this article here discusses on back to NetSpy, maintaining Azure persistence via automation accounts. So kind of the way they reviews the other type of the authentic through some of the automation of the managed identities. So you can do the same thing for maintaining persistence. So as they mentioned here, in every penetration test that involves Azure, you want to escalate our privileges to global administrator of the tenant. Once we've escalated privileges in the Azure tenant, we want to have the ability to maintain our access to each subscription and the tenant as a whole. Aside from the benefits of controlling the Azure tenant, it can be really handy to have an Azure backdoor that could potentially be used to pivot back into the main AD environment. So if they have something on-prem, then you can actually exploit this to get inside the network. So you got one of these scenarios that could be very interesting. So after escalating privileges and ask the Azure tenant, we can make use of automation runbooks. So the automation runbooks in Azure let you automate starting up VMs and doing different processes. So they're talking about here that there's multiple ways to persist, but for this post, they'll focus on using automation accounts that are configured with excessive privileges, automation runbooks, and webhook triggers that will allow us to regain access to Azure environments. So there's that. And there's also the AppSec villages too at some of those at the conferences too. And a lot of times there are a lot of bug bounty related talks go on there too. So if you're interested in bug bounty. Okay, so the main privileges in Azure, add an automation account with excessive privileges that can be used to add new accounts with subscription owner privileges to Azure AD via a single post request. So potential scenario for the purpose of this blog post, imagine this is fairly standard Azure attack lifecycle. Attacker compromises Azure account. Attacker escalates privileges up to global administrator. Blue team revokes initial access or global administrator access. So in this type of scenario, we want to have some type of persistence. So you got caught, so you want to be able to get persist. So based on the author's experience, automation accounts typically fly under the radar. If they are set up properly, they can be used to regain owner or higher permissions to subscription in the Azure tenant with a new Azure AD account. So since newly created Azure accounts are more likely to get noticed, they should be used for short-term access. While the automation accounts will act as long as the long-haul persistence account, the automation accounts can be also configured for password access or cert-based authentication. So this can also be an option for getting back into the subscription. So general purpose, create a new automation account, import new runbook that creates an Azure AD user with owner permissions for the subscription. So there's a sample runbook located in this blog. So here's the information for how one of those runbooks are set up. So add the Azure module to the automation account. Update the Azure automation modules. Assign user, administrator, and subscription owner to the automation account. Add a webhook to the runbook. Eventually lose your access. Trigger the webhook to post a request to create a new user. So it's really cool the way this automation for an attacker or a pen tester, how it helps with persistence. Without that type of automation, you'd have to find other ways to get persistence to be able to gain access back in. And one of the things like from red teaming engagement, stuff like C2s, using command and control sometimes makes it easier to maintain persistence or get back in, because if you're running a Metasploit exploit and you lose connection. Sometimes you lost connection. You got to re-exploit that system. And so with like Cobalt Strike, if you lose connection, you have to reboot your attacking system. A lot of cases, you can connect right back to that system that helps maintain persistence. So in this cloud scenario, you have to look at using something like these run books to automate recreating users. So this run book could be modified to run as a global admin that creates a new global admin, but that's really noisy. So you're wanting to stay, this is kind of a red team scenario, so you're not wanting to get caught. Let me know if you do this. I'd be interested to see how well it works. Okay, I realize this is a bit of legwork to maintain persistence, but the eventual goal is to automate the process with some PowerShell and integrate it with the existing microburst tools. So creating automation account, navigate to automation account, section of Azure portal, and create a new automation account, naming it something basic like backup automation process. Should avoid raising too many suspicions. So here they're using something that looks, innocent, that looks like something to be normal. So when you're creating those kind of accounts, you don't want to put like I pwned you or whatever or something like that, or putting things suspicious or hackery in the titles. So you can see here they're creating the runbook code. So the name, the subscription. So this is the subscription that it's interacting with, resource group, automated test, and then the location. Create Azure run account. So they're selecting yes. If you want to blend in with the default runbooks, the import runbook name should follow the same naming strategy. So use the same naming consider the same naming convention as the others. So strategy of this tutorial is Azure automation tutorial. So if you follow the naming convention, you'll want to import and publish your malicious runbook into account as soon as possible. The closer the timestamp is to the tutorial runbook, the less suspicious it will be. So can you tell which one of these runbooks is the malicious one? So here all these look pretty much along the same. They're using the Azure automation tutorial naming convention. So once imported, you need to also publish the runbook. This will then allow you to set the webhook for remote triggering the runbook. To set the webhook, go to webhooks under the tab of the runbook. So you can see here, add webhook. Name, not a backdoor. That's not really a good name. And so you can have like even an expiration date. So one of the good things about doing this type of stuff, if you're doing a pen test, and that's kind of like your C2, if there's any way the C2 you're using, if you can add a way to make your beacons expire or your shells expire in the command and control or C2 environment, they refer to it as beacons. So you want to set it to expire because otherwise you leave it. I heard a recent podcast where Black Hills Information Security Group had went on and did a pen test, and someone had run a pen test and they still had their beacons running. They didn't expire, so they were able to get shells to the systems because that beacon was already running. So you want to make sure you set expiration dates, because once you're done, you don't want someone else to come in and, a malicious actor and get access to the system. So depending on how long your operation running, you may want to set your expiration date way off in the future to protect your ability to trigger the webhook. So yeah, also keep in mind that you're not putting it too far off in the future. An important step, copy the webhook and keep webhook URL and keep it for when you need to trigger your backdoor. So module maintenance, since the Azure module is not standard for automation accounts, you'll need to import it into your account. Go to the modules tab for the automation account and use the browser gallery feature, and you'll find Azure AD module, import to your account. Within 5 to 15 minutes, it will deploy, and the modules can sometimes take a while to populate automation accounts. So be patient. So here you can see for the Azure AD automation accounts. So additionally, your automation account may not play nicely with the current old version of Azure RM module. I don't really know why that is that way. Still an issue with Azure. So sometimes when you're running exploits, things run, or it's not always clear cut why or why not they don't run. So this can be done with this runbook. So they got links to the runbook. So you can set this up yourself. Since we're using a new automation account, the update shouldn't cause any issues with existing runbooks. Alternatively, if you're using an existing automation account for all this, updating the modules could cause capability issues with existing runbooks. You would also need to assign additional rights to your existing automation account, which is what we'll cover next. Okay, thanks for sharing the information. And then I'm not sure what Covenant may call it something else too. I forget what Covenant calls it. I went through a course recently and I was using Cobalt Strike and Covenant, and they have different terminology for it. Yeah, that's it, grunts. So setting the automation account rights. So you have to set the automation for these accounts. Once the automation account is configured and a webhook is set, automation account will need proper rights to add a new user and give its owner rights to the subscription. To add these rights, navigate to Azure Directory tab with a tenant admin account, then open up roles administration. Within that section, open user administrator role and add the automation account to the group. The automation account will be labeled with the name of the account and a 64 base 64 string appended to the end. So we can see the base 64 string added to that. Given the fact the username may not stick out against the other users in the group, you may want to rename it automation account. This can be done in Azure AD app registration under branding. So here they're going to change the name. After adding the user administrator rights, the automation account user will need to be added as an owner to this on the subscription. This can be done throughout the subscription tab. Select the subscription that you want to persist in the role. And so where they're talking about doing all this, this is the things you would do before you lose persistence. So once you've got once you're in there, you want to get this set up, get your backdoor, your persistence set so you can get back in case you lose that. So triggering a webhook, let's say that after escalating privileges and setting a persistence backdoor, the compromised tenant account gets flagged. Now you're locked out. Using the webhook URL for the earlier steps, in the example caller function below, you can create a new subscription owner. So here's the syntax for doing that. This process may take a minute as the runbook job will need to spool up. After that has completed, you should have a newly minted subscription owner account. So you see some of this automation stuff, it's kind of scary what you can do with this automation. And you know, some people think cloud is more secure. You have to have it configured correctly. But when you see some of this automation stuff, you know, it's really amazing what you could do and just some of the ways that they maintain persistence through the cloud compared to some of the, you know, legacy Windows type of persistence and the things you have to do to maintain persistence there is you know, the cloud stuff is pretty amazing what they allow you to automate. So here they're showing running that. So you're getting to the login for that. This is the new account. So it's being granted the account. So you have to go in and put in your credentials there and then change your credentials you log in. So potential concerns and detection techniques, while this process can be somewhat quiet in the right environment, it may be fairly obvious in the wrong one. A couple of things to keep in mind: creating a new Azure AD user could trigger an alert. Creating a new automation account could trigger an alert. Adding a user to the administrators and owners groups should and could trigger an alert. So this automation accounts section are not typically in an Azure users portal dashboard. An attacker may be able to hide out for a while in the automation account. So that's an interesting way to maintain persistence. So in any of the Azure content for like some of the certification courses, maybe Michael can answer this. Do they have anything in there for they cover run books in the Azure content? So someone mentioned C2 frameworks. Yeah, so if you look at the C2 matrix, that gives you a list of the different C2s out there. And George Orchius does some good talks on that. So there's the link to the C2 matrix. So that's a good resource. It's kind of interesting to see how people kind of set up their own C2s using things like Slack. There's been a couple interesting conference talks over the past couple of years on people setting up Slack to use as like a C2. I think along the lines of that, I had some friends that did consulting, and they actually, yeah. So at any rate, yeah, I think that's one of the last places I saw reference to was Red Siege using Slack. But I saw someone before actually mention that before them. They may have, I don't know if they come out with that or something, but someone did a talk, I think DEF CON in 2019. I mean, DerbyCon in 2019, I believe, did a talk on that. Yeah. So Carlos said, heard a Darknet Diaries post about hacking group using Facebook as a C2 as well. That's pretty cool. Where that stuff's really handy, you can just, some people really don't expect that to be used as a C2. The things you would expect to happen through Facebook are nothing like that. That's pretty interesting. Yeah, we've actually had a couple people from our Dallas community on Darknet Diaries. Tinkersec was on there once, and there's a guy, David Evenden, that lives in Denton, Texas, which is north of Dallas, that was in an episode of Darknet Diaries. He goes by Jedi Mammoth on Twitter. He used to work for the NSA and stuff, and he did some interesting things there. There's actually someone that was doing a red team training, a red team cohort, where they would find people without, people that are interested in learning how to pen test and do red teaming. And part of it was like a group study thing. It was a free mentoring type situation. And part of the content they used for that training was episodes from the Darknet Diaries. So they had picked different episodes of Darknet Diaries each week for the students or mentees to go through prior to the meetings, where they would cover some educational content, but they would also go over those episodes, kind of help learn, help developing the offensive mindset. Do that. So we're kind of getting through the content a little quicker than expected. So let's see. So yeah, we covered what we're supposed to cover today. So anyone have any questions or comments or anything they want to share? Oh, thanks, Michael. Actually, have done some podcasting too. So I'm on the Uncommon Journey podcast, and then I started my own, the Hacker Factory. And actually, Lily is going to be on one of the episodes. Lily Clark that was on here, she was actually on one of my episodes, which I think her episode comes out the end of the month. So it was a lot of fun. This is, if you guys haven't checked that out, I highly recommend it, because part of the reason behind doing this is a lot of things I do is related towards offensive security, cybersecurity education, and helping people learn. And part of this podcast is to get different people's stories, as well as tips on learning how to be a hacker or pen tester. John Jackson, the episode that I did with him, that was a lot of fun. He had some great advice on there. Tiberius was one of the most recent episodes. And then I've got one coming out probably in June with this reform hacktivist. So this hacktivist had actually went to prison, got caught by the FBI, did prison time, and then is reformed and actually is a blue teamer now. So that was a pretty interesting story. So it's really cool to hear the different stories, because, people, sometimes people like to hear the stories, the war stories of pen testers, and then just getting to understand people's origin story, how they got started, the background they come from, and sometimes it's motivational. And one of the reasons I had Lily on there was, a lot of people say I can't do that, and some people that are even from a technical background think it's tough. But Lily sat there, didn't have a security background, didn't have an IT background, went through the EJPT and passed the certification. And, this is someone that went to school for, got a kinesiology degree, someone that should be a personal trainer or something like that. And she learned it. So it goes to show, no matter where you're in your career, if someone wants to do this, you can learn it. And that's why I always share my story in my conference talks about starting out as a professional wrestler. People know that, your weightlifters, your meatheads are big dumb guys. And, I thought that about myself and found it's different. Yeah, Mike, actually, one of the podcasts I host is with her. I would have her on, but if I ever do a hackers' rights episode, she'd be good. But most of the people I'm inviting are people that have gotten certified, learned pen testing, or do some kind of hacking. So actually, the Uncommon Journey podcast I host with her and Alyssa Miller. Yeah, I've known Chloe. I met Chloe when I was a Bug Crowd ambassador. When I started out, Jason Haddix was overseeing the program, and they brought Chloe in to help. So that's how Chloe and I know each other. Actually been on some panels at different conferences that Chloe ran for Bug Crowd. Yeah, it's just like anything else. There's a lot of things. And Jason Haddix is awesome. He was one of my first people that I got introduced in bug bounty. And this is before, back in 2017, 18 timeframe, bug bounties become a lot more popular. So, actually, how I know of Jason Haddix, first I heard of him, is the Ethical Hacker Network that Don on here runs. He started that online magazine and group, community group. And that's how I first found out about Jason, reading his articles and seeing his posts on the forums there, and then started following him on Twitter. So yeah, anyone that's interested in web app pen testing, then that's a good place to learn web app pen testing, because a bug bounty hunter has to, you have to find bugs to get paid. So you really have to work hard. I mean, it's whether you find bugs or not, if you like this kind of thing, it's fun. But at any rate, yeah, the learning from these people. I mean, even like John Jackson, you know, is really well known or really knows a lot about the bug bounty area. He's got a book coming out on it. So yeah, the Ethical Hacker Network. I've got some articles over there too. I've got an article series on um, wireless or Wi-Fi pen testing, and then also an article on manually detecting vulnerabilities. So yeah, it's a great resource, Don. Actually, it's pretty cool because at the 2019 RSA and B-side San Francisco, I'd been familiar with Don for a while over the years and knew Jason, but we hadn't met in person. So the 2019 RSA conference and B-side San Francisco, I got to meet Don and Jason both. Yeah, Don is awesome. So that's one of the cool things about working here is it's always fun when you get to work somewhere with your friends. And Lily and I didn't really know each other before starting here, but another person on our team that I'm happy to call my friend. And Don's a lot smarter than he gives himself credit for too. This guy can do technical talks on stuff, and he's the community director. And most people that are community directors, unless you're someone for a bug bounty company involved in bug bounty, they're usually not doing any kind of technical talks. So yeah, the bug hunter methodology is a good one. So thanks for sharing that, Ali. And he's constantly that's on Bug Crowd, but he's got like a version 4 of it out there. So if you do a search on it, he's updated it. At one time, it was like a very long talk, and he's kind of split it up to part of it is like a reconnaissance. So yeah. Mike says his voice is intoxicating. I keep telling him he should be. Don is good, and to be on a webinar with him, dude, I just have enough courage, and I want to share what I have to say that I get on podcasts and webinars and stuff. But Don is so polished. I mean, he could take some of these announcers' place on some of these shows. He could be, he could take Don Pardo's place. Some of you may not get that reference. My Novell buddy on here probably gets that, but yeah, Don is really polished, and he kind of motivates me to try harder to improve my speaking skills. One of the things I really learned from him too is really scripting your stuff, really putting together, planning out your webinar. So I guess I better shut up on this Don stuff. He's probably starting to blush. So William says, whatever happened to Ethical Hacker Network webinars? Yeah, Don, what? Yeah, I don't know about that, Don, but thanks. That's nice of you. Yeah, Don, shoot, Ed McMahon is just lucky that Don's not younger. Don would have had his spot. So yeah, I don't know about that. Don can comment on Ethical Hacker Network webinars. He's been doing a lot of webinars for INE because Don was kind of his own thing, and then his site and community got acquired by eLearn Security, and that's how it became part of INE. So he does a lot of stuff through INE, the same type of stuff. Just they're wanting to brand their company and name. So yes, I guess it had been too awful long time ago that I did the articles for the wireless pen testing on his community. So some of the articles and stuff over there are still fairly relevant and new. Yeah, anything Don does is good. This is starting to sound like the Don fan club. Yeah, so William, INE is a great platform, but there seems to be a disconnect between courses offered and all other content. Yeah, that's kind of, there's kind of, I think you'll see that stuff, that situation improve because, like the data science stuff and e-learning security stuff was an acquisition. So it's still being all incorporated into the same platform. So you'll see things like there improve, and we're listening to our students or customers, listening to their tips and constantly working to improve upon what we're doing. So yeah, it's gonna get better. And the thing that's nice now is you had all the yeah. So this is a really cool project that Don's working on. It's one of the things too that's working here that yeah, I just shut up. I just can't. I just keep getting impressed further and further and understand why they have Don here. But like the Lab Zero, this is the prep students new altogether because e-learn security used to not be e-learn security used to be a more well-known entity among industry professionals or people in security. And like a lot of these other companies, as security's become more popular, more people are trying to get into it and they don't have that background. So some of the things like Don's working on, like this Lab Zero, it's to show students how to use some basic Linux stuff, how to use OpenVPN, make it easier to use the lab. So there's things we're doing to make it more beginner friendly, because I don't think that was always the focus. The level of what we consider a beginner now is someone without like an IT or technical background. So Ali says, will INE offer a programming course focused towards pen testing? I think there's some stuff related to, I think there's maybe some content related towards, like in the student course, they do some programming related stuff, but that area may expand. I know there's some exploitation courses, but there are some other, but also too, when you're learning programming, you don't always learn it in the way that you're going to apply it. You can go take a course on Python. Once you learn that, then you can start writing Python tools. That's like the book Black Hat Python. It shows you some basics, but really you need to do some studying up front. But there are some things related to that, because I think there's a Python course and there's some other programming related stuff for the pen tester student. So yeah, thanks, Mike. So the EJPT has Python and the ECPPT has PowerShell and Ruby. And one Ruby reasons there is because you're Metasploit modules. So Marcos has a question. This is my first INE bootcamp. Do we receive any kind of proof or certificate of attendance? I am not sure. You may be able to do that. Don, do you know if that's available? We can check and see, because I know what you're kind of wanting that, because you can use these for your employer and then for CPEs and that related stuff too. So that's a good point to bring up. I can check into that and find out. Yeah, and the Black Hat Python, they're actually coming out with they've come out with a new version too, because the version 2 focuses more on Python 3. So that's a good one. Also too, Golang, the Go programming language created by Google, that's worth checking out too. There's a good book on that called Black Hat Go. And it's a similar type book. They show you how to create different pen testing tools using Go. So that's a good way to do it. And then make sure when you're programming, make sure you're doing projects. So let's like the Black Hat Python and the Black Hat Go books have a lot of step-by-step stuff building offensive security tools. So that's the way you learn it. So getting in there and actually doing the coding. So Mike says all the Occupy with the web books. I need to check out some of his books. I know the guy is pretty knowledgeable in the industry and has quite a few books out there. So Don has a slight clarification. EJPT and ECPPT are ELS cert exams. The PTS and PPT contain the content. Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. So Marco, so that's something I'd like to see in the future in any course, building tools using Golang. Thanks for sharing that. And anytime you can share that stuff with our with INE. Those are the things that we look at whenever we're creating content or looking at what our customers are wanting to learn, looking at what the industry. So I think Go would be a good one because I know companies are writing a lot more offensive tools in Golang now. So it's a very powerful tool, programming language. Yeah, it's hard to just making changing the tools, because I really, one of the things I'd go back and do different on my pen tester blueprint book is when I put it out, started creating, when I first did the conference talk, or actually the lecture, it was pre-INE and it's all e-learn security. And so as that changed, the book went out and that wasn't updated to reflect INE, but anyone that references it would see that. So if I make any updates, that would be updated to reflect INE. So yeah, that's some good discords there. Also, the one that Tiberius runs too, or he's on, is a pretty good one as well. Eugenius said, I recently passed the ECPPT and I'm working towards OSCP. So far, difficulty wise, felt like the ECP actually is a lot more difficult to learn, but in the UK, there are hardly any jobs asking for the ECPPT. Was curious whether there are any plans for INE to start working with Crest a bit more. Thanks for that recommendation. I know we're trying to get our certifications more well known, so that's something to take in effect, because I kind of first found out about Crest after getting my OSCP, because there was some talks with them on, at one point, if you had the OSCP, if you applied, you could have gotten the Crest cert. So I know we're wanting to work on getting more visibility for our certs. So Crest, I know, is really popular over in Europe and the UK. So that's a good one to know. But so they're trying to improve upon that. So one of the things I do think is going through the eLearn stuff, the eLearn certifications or the INE content before you do some of these other certifications, it helps a little bit more, because just the starting out at a low enough level. Okay, so Don says ELS certs are listed in Crest. So just kind of to put this out there, we can stay on here and chat and answer questions, but the lecture is done for the day, and we'll resume tomorrow, finish up the content. And at any rate, we've covered all that was going to be covered today, so you're free to leave anytime you're ready to. And I appreciate everyone sharing today and the questions, because anytime you ask questions, there's someone else that's thinking the same thing, or maybe they didn't think to ask that question and it's kind of helped them. So I appreciate it. And anyone, if we hadn't connected on LinkedIn, reach out to me. I'd be happy to connect on LinkedIn. You can email me. Actually, someone just recently emailed me from yesterday, and I will follow up with them. They had some questions, so happy to help. So yeah, tomorrow we'll do more demoing techniques, because what I want to do is get through the content and then get more into the hands-on thing. So we'll cover kind of more, get the lecture, and then get into doing some demos, and then we should go back and we'll demo some of the techniques that were involved in some of the earlier slides. So tomorrow, to get a little more fun, we had to build that base up here. We had to give the prerequisite knowledge of the different techniques and stuff. We'll finish that up tomorrow, and then we'll get into more of the fun stuff. But as far as some of the ELS certs, those are becoming more well known. And I think as time goes, I think it's going to be even more so, because they're getting a lot more exposure, and a lot of people that are out there in the community, like the Cyber Mentor and uh, a lot of these other well-known people in the community are helping getting the word out there. And John Hammond, yeah, John Hammond's awesome. Hey, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining. I appreciate you joining. And so we'll be doing more of these too. So we've got this one coming up, and then July, I'm slated to do another workshop then, but we've got some blue team workshops coming up. There's like a DFIR Azure course is the next boot camp that's coming up. Yeah, one of the things I like about the content we provide is it's you don't necessarily have to be an industry professional to be able to consume it. Where some of these other courses, you really need some kind of background in pen testing or just getting started to be able to really understand it. Thanks for joining us, Brent. Thank you. Great to see everyone. See you, Andre. See you, Mike. Bye, Don. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for the kind words, Don. Thanks for joining, Palmy. I look forward to seeing you. Always a pleasure to see you, my friend. Thanks, Ali. Thanks, George. Thanks, Marcos. Thanks, Ibrahim. Thanks, Ivan. You all have made this class a lot of fun. So I hope to see you all back tomorrow, and then maybe for the next pen test workshop that I do, which should be fun. I'm pretty excited about. Thanks for joining us, Stephen. Ishmael, thanks for joining us. Rajat, thanks. David, see you tomorrow. So we don't have any more questions, then we're going to shut this down. Thanks again, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day, and we will see you all tomorrow.